Aye, there's nothing like a refreshing cider on a sunny Sunday afternoon. Relatively speaking, of course. So, as promised, here's the Submersible. The Hasegawa Shinkai 6500 with its precious find on the ocean floor, an A6 M50. This was the kit that I bought, remember, when the club we all went down to the North Shields model show, and it was just, when I saw it, I couldn't resist it. I'm going through this getting out of my comfort zone phase, as you all know, and I couldn't resist buying it. It also was to tie in with that, the club comp night, which the theme was ship. If you remember, I also bought the little Russian guard ship, remember that, the Mirage Hobby? Started building that with the intention of finishing it and entering it into the little competition. But at 1/350th scale, and being the type of ship it was, guard ship, which meant it had lots of antennas and posts and God knows what, they don't represent too well in styrene at 1/350th scale. I think scaled up they'd have been the equivalent of, like, you know, American redwoods. So I kind of thought, well, it'd be a shame to just waste the kit. So I employed a tool, one of the tools that I have on my wall here, to aid finishing the thing. Now I call the piece Exoset, and this is what it ended up like. Yeah, okay, anyway, enough of that. So yeah, the little sub, it was great fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was almost a snap together kit that Hasegawa have put together. It's one of these educational series kits that they do. This is my first, my initiation into them, as it were. I didn't know that they did this sort of thing. There was coloured plastic and that type of thing, and lots of decals to replicate things that you would normally try and paint yourself, which is what I've done here. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and of course when I'm building a model I tend to research a wee bit about it on the internet. And oh, it was also that I chose to light this one, remember? I used a fibre optic set. It was a very inexpensive set. I think it was less than £10 posted. And it came with 10 optic strands, and it's powered by a couple of AA batteries. And the idea was that because the lights on the front of the craft are very, very small, and in hindsight I probably should have gone for tiny little micro LEDs. I'm still a novice, a complete and utter novice when it comes to lighting anything. But I thought maybe getting like this 10 strands of fibre optics, and some of the bigger lights had 2 or 3 strands in them, and the idea was to, as I drill them out, the strands would come through, they'd be snipped off, and then I'd fill that with PVA glue, so it would form like a little lens and it would conduct the light and whatnot. But the result was completely and utterly underwhelming, to the point that you can barely see that they're on. But you know what, you live and learn, don't you? Other things I've done to it, did a little bit of scratch building here and there. I've added cabling, that, you know, for all the gubbins at the front, and also the baskets that the claws put obviously things into. They were just moulded as solid. I mean, I think Hasegawa actually do this in 1/48 scale. I know Bandai do a 1/48 scale one, but again the baskets are still represented as solid. So it took me a wee while to come up with something for them. I was trying to think like taking, the material in women's tights, stockings, that type of material, and stretching that over a frame, but making the frame was actually too difficult. I eventually ended up just I actually had aluminium mesh in my drawer of bits and bobs, and it was just a simple case of cutting and folding up, and then I used tape to represent the strapping on it. So the mesh isn't to scale. It's a bigger mesh than what it probably should have been, but you know what, it looks okay. And as I say, I've added cabling, hydraulics and whatnot to the grab arms, and electrics to the lights and things like that, and one or two wee bits on the top. But other than that, it's pretty much out of box, because there's not an awful lot to it anyway. And no weathering, or no, not weathering, aging. I mean, every picture I've seen of the thing looks pretty much pristine, and obviously it's not going to get grimy because it's it's in the water all the time anyway. So I've kind of left it. I did a tiny bit of panel line washes here and there, just in certain key areas, but it was so dilute you can barely see it. But I'm quite happy with the result. I used a gloss white, very thin mix, and just built up layer after layer after layer to get what looks to me to be a scale gloss finish, and it'll be a similar method that I'll be using on the big London bus and the Volkswagen Samba as well. As for the Zero, this was actually given to me by our postman, who isn't. He built it years ago, and it's been sitting in on his shelf somewhere. He's not an aircraft builder. He builds figures and old sailing ships, and by old sailing ships I mean like Greek and Persian, that type of thing. And he gave it to me and said, "Is there anything you can do with that?" It didn't have a canopy, and the wheels were missing and things. And I straight away I recognised it as a Hasegawa kit, and I thought, well, remember that a long time ago I did that thing with the Airfix Zero, I ripped it apart and rebuilt it, and I kind of took it on the basis that I might do that someday, knowing that chances are I probably wouldn't. So anyway, I was looking for a subject to be a sunken wreck, as it were, and obviously that fitted the bill perfectly. Something that's sitting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and because it didn't have a canopy, it didn't matter a damn. So I scratch built the what do you call it? All the canopy and the control surfaces, because obviously they're fabric, and the fabric would have disintegrated over time. But basically, the base is just polystyrene, and I literally just snapped bits like the wings to get them to look as if the plane had started to settle over the years. And I used what do you call it? The foam that florists use for sticking flowers in to create sort of like rocky outcrops and whatnot. I then used it's a white glue called Mod Podge. My wife bought it for something that she was doing. There it is there. You get it in hobby shops, and it dries clear. And I mixed that up with just sand. We had a bag of sand in the garden, so I mixed that up and painted it. Literally painted the substrate with that, and then because the sand is 1-to-1 scale, if you think about it, it's exactly the same as what you would find on the ocean floor. I used, you know the mounting glue, the spray that you get for artists. You spray it on and you can mount stuff. I sprayed the whole thing with that, and then sprinkled talcum powder over certain key areas, and talcum powder just obviously adhered to that, but it gave a much more realistic scale coating, as it were. And then it was just a simple case of painting it up, and till I got something that looked like the bottom of the ocean. I used scouring pads and ripping little bits off to create the little tendrils of seaweed and whatnot. And there's plenty of images online of these things. Which brings me to this thing. You're probably wondering, what the hell is that? Because of the nature of the dial, I just thought it might be nice to do something to kind of show it, almost like these things you see in museums. This is just a simple box. It's painted blue with a kind of oceany floor type coloration at the bottom, and in the top here is an LED light, 3 LEDs, which then shines through. I'll show you here. That's one of those blank discs that you get in a pack of CDs, and what I've done is I've splodged Mod Podge on it, say that 10 times fast, splodged Mod Podge, and used a blue rinse, or like the equivalent of a blue pin wash, to create lots of variations in intensities of colour and intensities of thickness, so that when you shine the light through it, it creates what looks like light shining through the surface waves. And I had the further idea of using one of those, this is kind of what's left of it, they're the little display things that jewellers use. They rotate slowly, and they put like a watch or a ring box or something on it, and it rotates. I bought one off of eBay. It was £3.49, free postage and packing from Hong Kong. The first one arrived, didn't work at all, and they kindly sent me another one, which did work, but wasn't. As soon as you turned it upside down, obviously the little magnet in the coil separating it just doesn't work. So I'm going to have to look into that. Maybe bite the bullet and buy a proper turntable, and one that hopefully turns a little bit faster. But the idea is to have the light inside there rotating, because there's 3 lights. That's 4, Gary. Because there's 3 lights, as they rotate, they create, you know, variations in the light effect, as it were. So it does look like the waves on the surface are moving. But I haven't quite got that yet. But to give you an idea of what it might look like, I filmed this, but turning it by hand, so it looks a little rough, but it will give you a kind of a sort of an inkling as to what it would look like. Now the question I wanted to ask you, guys, is that I'm going to have the Jamstack logo on the front, which is the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology. That's the little roundel that's on the tail fin of the thing. So I'm going to have that there anyway. But as for the flanks, I had to go, I printed off all these pictures that I downloaded off the internet. That's the vessel that deploys the submersible. A little close up there, that's it in the water, that's it diving, and then on the bottom we've got a wreck of a plane. Now the thing is, when I put these on, they didn't quite go on as planned, and there's a few wrinkles and a few creases, but I'm just wondering if it looks a bit tacky or not. So I'm just asking your opinion. Would you rather it had this sort of thing up the side, or would you rather it was just plain old black, which wouldn't distract from it whatsoever? As I say, I'm going to have the Jamstack logo on the front, but I don't know whether to have just plain black or to have another. I'm going to have to take these off anyway, because they just don't look that great. I sprayed a matte varnish over them, and it just looks a bit cheap and nasty. So the next time, hopefully if I do that, they'll go on better. But as I say, I'd like your opinion. So this the reason I've kept it separate, and a lot of people have said, well, it's a shame you have that pole for the sub. It's a pity you didn't have it going out the side, because when you see it in here, like, I'll show you. Hopefully I won't destroy anything. This actually is designed to fit just perfectly over there. Yeah. So that's it. There you go. Lovely waves. People are saying, well, it's a pity you can see that pole. But the idea is that if I'm taking this to a show, depending on where the show is or where I'm displaying it, I might not want to bring this. I might just want to take the base, in which case that's why the sub sits on a vertical pole as opposed to, and I understand the reasons behind it, a rod going out through the back of this, which would render it completely invisible. But that's it, that's the sub. That was a very enjoyable build, I have to say. Quite fancy trying the 1/48 scale, to be honest with you. Although whether sacrificing a 1/48 scale 0 or, I suppose I've got kits under there that I could do that with. I did actually see that one of the things that inspired me was I actually saw someone had done this with a B-17 sitting on the surface, which was quite interesting. But anyway, there we go. All in all, something a little bit different, and as they say, change is as good as the rest. So with that, I'll bid you adieu, and I'll get back to my cider. Toodaloo.